Okay, so hi guys. So I'm gonna be doing this video. It's meant for a buddy, but since I'm gonna be publishing it on YouTube, I might as well just let it be a general public thing. It's a video on how to use Divinity Original Sin, the Game Master mode, for Dungeons and Dragons. And what I mean by using it for Dungeons and Dragons is that as simple as using it for images, sounds, and music, to as complex as actually using it for combat. The combat part I'm not going to be touching on this part because I use it but he does not, because he sticks to something more similar to DnD combat, though it is different. So this first part is going to be just how to use the tool as a visual tool, because the way we kind of use it, or the way I kind of use it, which he might be using it for, is that I run 3 monitors and I also have a laptop. So I stream my Game Master mode campaign from the laptop to my 3 monitors, and it's kind of like the back of your GM screen is a constantly changing image of whatever you want it to be. So if you wanted to display monsters, you can. If you wanted to display maps like you can right here, you can definitely do that. But we're going to go into the details as to how to do that exactly, how to do it efficiently, and the way that it's used in general. Okay, so basically the Game Master mode has 3 sections. It's the best way I can describe it. It has a map mode, a vignette mode, and a game field mode. The game field is what you use, very much like that little chess piece over there, is what you use for combat. You can use it for more than that. Like if you have a decently small group, you can go as far as designing a whole city or downloading a city map and giving them the ability to roam freely. But if I'm 100% honest with you, that's not a great idea, because you're letting the players take the reign of your campaign to an extent. You have to improvise much more, and it's more of a video game and less about D&D. And this is about using the video game as a tool for Dungeons and Dragons, not the other way around. D&D is not the tool for the video game in this case. Unless that's more your thing, we're free to do that, but you might be in the wrong tutorial right now. So the map mode is going to be our main focus here, because this is the place we're going to be displaying the images. So in this case, we have a map displayed, right? But in my campaign, while I do use maps, his is a little bit more ambiguous, because it's more about discovering the world and less about already knowing what's there. So we're going to go ahead and focus on other things like monsters. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and created a monsters folder and a map folder. But to give an example, I'm going to go ahead and create another one. So you can go ahead and click here, and it creates a new folder, which is empty right now. You can right click it, rename the folder, and we'll say it's beasts. So we've created a beasts folder, right? It's still empty, but we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna add, technically it's not a map, but this is the way it's displaying it. It's more along the lines of an image, so that we've created a new possibility. Basically, we're gonna go there, right click to change map image, and I have this wolf right here that I've added. The way that you would do that is you would go to browse. It's gonna open up a little window, and it's gonna show your folders within your computer. So if you've set up a folder with a bunch of images, you can go straight to that folder, no problem, and you'll find all your images there, as long as they're not gigantic in size. Like one of my maps was something like 40 megabytes, because I downloaded the freaking D&D map, the whole Sword Coast, and that was way too big. That didn't work. I didn't realize it till later, but that's fine. You can always find smaller maps or compress the maps yourself. So we're gonna go with this wolf image. We're gonna apply it. Now you're gonna notice that this wolf image is not the size we want it to be. That's because this image, the resolution of it is different. It's a long image versus it being a wide image, so it's gonna look weird. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get it to the appropriate size. So it's supposed to be longer. So this is not the best example. Usually you would try to find images that just work automatically, but that's not always the case. But there we go. Now we just center that, and then we have a map image. This is the player icon, which is used for maps. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take it and we're gonna hide it in a little corner. You can do that so that they're not visible, or you could just leave it there. Most players won't even notice that's there. They'll be paying attention to this right here. So now you have the image of a wolf, and You can do many things with that. In this case, it's straight up just an image, so you could just hit publish, and that would be visible to the players that are connected. In this case, we have one player connected, which is going to be the second computer, and that second computer is going to see immediately the image of the wolf. If we have more players with more laptops, they're going to have more images spread around the room. In our case, since we run our games locally at my place, this works out because two of my other players have gaming laptops, so it helps a lot to just kind of spread the image around the room. I can keep things kind of dark because there's so much lighting coming off of the computers, and it's very easy to set the mood. If on the other hand we want to stop displaying that image, we hit edit. The image is still displayed. They're still seeing this, but now we have some playing room. So they're still seeing that, but we can go ahead and then go to a map. It's going to show the map. We zoom to the particular area we want. Let's say it's over here, and we hit publish, and this is what they see. They're not going to see the whole map or the wolf image or whatever. They're seeing what we want them to see. So it's very useful to play around with dimensions and play around with locations in the case that you wanted to do a map. But you can do much more than a map. So let's take this wolf real quick. We're going to put it in the beast folder. So now we have our beasts here. We have our maps here. And we can slowly just kind of go crazy and add once that truck is gone. Okay. We can slowly just go crazy and add more and more folders with a bunch of stuff for whatever we want, from monsters to characters to maps to just imagery. I think the only weakness is it doesn't play GIFs. I have honestly not tried it, but I severely doubt that it can. Either ways, I've never recommended using GIFs because they're usually really small resolution images, because it's kind of like a mini video, and the bigger it is, the more space it takes, so it might not work to begin with. So other than that, I guess that's the main utility that you're going to be using as a game master if all you're interested in is using imagery. On top of that, if you want to set the mood a little bit more, you can go ahead and go to the mood panel, which you can do by clicking here, pressing J, and this brings up atmosphere, music, ambience, sound. To be very, I was already testing some stuff here. I want to mention something really quick because it's super useful. There's a search bar in almost every single panel. There's a search bar here. There's a search bar here. This panel we're not going to be touching because this is the combat panel, is what I call it, the game field panel, where people fight stuff or they get to play around in stages. In my case, fight stuff. I don't like to create giant stages because it's distracting, in my opinion. And I run a group of 8 players and it doesn't quite work. In fact, Divinity has a limit of 4 players. So for those of you that are more technically savvy, what I've done is I've given each player a henchman, and when they're fighting, they pass the controller to the next person in line, and they do their stuff, and so on and so on. There's basically 4 controllers going around, getting passed around. And since most of my friends or most of the players are gamers, they don't mind at all, and some of them even like it. That's how I do combat. Okay, so back to the mood panel. This is where you can set the mood. It's very much what it's intended for. Atmosphere is useless because it's for stages. This will determine the weather or the way the day looks per se. You can make it a clear sky, you can make it look like dawn, you can get kind of crazy and make it super dark or bloody dark. There's one that makes, you know, stuff look red and ashy. But we're more interested in these other 3. So for music, we have all the options, or almost all of the options. I'm not 100% sure if it's all the options the game comes with. Their fight music, their origin character music. I've used some of these to kind of set the mood in specific ways. Exploration music, which is super useful if you have really nothing going on and you just want to kind of create something. There's some stuff that's really cool even though it's exploration music, like Power of Innocence I've used a couple times. Tavern music, is pretty much what it sounds like, and these are a little bit different, but basically you would select whichever one you want. What I do sometimes if I want to set the mood in a particular way, there's some keywords to an extent. Like if I write the word dark, then it's gonna have all of these dark ones. Another keyword is mystic, I believe. Oh wait, click it. Yeah, there's a couple there, and then there's light. Right, so let's go for something dark since they're gonna be fighting a wolf. And it's a good idea to kind of listen to these to get a good idea of how they sound, because they're all named similarly, but some of them sound very different. So sometimes you have to play around during the campaign, which isn't as nice. Yeah, that's more like a mysterious. If this was like a spirit wolf, that one would make some sense. Maybe it would make more sense to put something more combat-y. You would go here and look for this one, maybe. Yeah, that one would fit. So we'll stop that because I have no idea how loud that is or if it's even coming through. Then we'll go to ambience. This is more to set the mood if you're not going to have music. If you are going to have music, I suggest you play around with your sound settings, because the music tends to be much louder than the ambience. Use, for example, since right now they're in a city location, I use civilization and I'll go marketplace, and you can hear people and voices. It's very low. Quick second, my dog needs to go out. Like I was saying, it's very low, so you could go to your sound settings and play around with that. Some of it is louder than others. My understanding is the higher the number goes, the louder it gets. Let's see. Yeah, no, that's not in the game. That's in my house, if you heard the honking. Yeah, I live right next to one of the main avenues. So there's that one. It's slightly louder. And then there's this, which is very, very specific. If you're going to use this, you either start to get familiar with them, or you have something pre-planned. Like, for example, I had a scene where they encountered a dragon, and they heard the dragon's roar from a distance. So I knew that was going to happen, because encountering a dragon is a big deal in DnD, and in my campaign it's an even bigger deal, because dragons are basically, at least in my campaign, kind of the creators of the geography of the world. So they're like almost gods. So encountering one is nearly impossible, and to begin with, because they're rare, and then on top of that, they're insanely powerful and insanely dangerous. So you knowing this, because I've been harping on that for a while with my players, you knowing this and you suddenly hear this. As a player, you're like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. So that's super useful. And there's some really specific stuff, like the sounds certain arrows make. But again, you either have to be familiar with those sounds, or you're either familiar with those sounds, or you play around with them, or you pre-plan something and then play around with the sounds. But this panel in particular is super specific. This is the kind of stuff that GMs tend to forget during a session, because it's just so much minuscule detail. You get distracted with other things and forget to execute it. So in my mind, just kind of create a general association. Like if you know there's going to be a dragon encounter one way or another, then you can associate dragon sound. But if you're thinking, oh, there's going to be this one soldier that's going to shoot the players on top of a gate near the castle they're going to go to, one, that could not happen. They might just go around and never encounter that, so that whole planning was useless. Two, they might, just be really careful and sneak up on the guard or try to initiate conversation with him. Or three, you'll just forget because they're so crazy and doing other stuff that you'll just be super distracted handling that, and you'll just forget to execute that at all. So try to make it bigger things, if anything. It's the advice I could give as a dungeon master. So that pretty much does it for that. Basically, if you're going to be using this as a tool to set the mood and create imagery, this is what you can do. There's a lot of options. Above that, if for example you're going to be using maps, like I said, you can zoom in and out, but you can also, like you can see here, create pins, create new pin, and blah 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 77. You can move that pin around. That's a good way. I use this a lot for my players to remember locations and associate things with certain locations. Like we could say there's an orphanage here, Tiny Tim orphanage, that one's over here. Pop lives here. The road less traveled is this one because it's a freaking desert, and then some crazy stuff in the ocean. And you can also create text. This is super useful if you want to have a description of something in particular. You can play around with the sizing of this. This is not limited to maps, of course. You can use this for monsters. It does not have to be on the image. You can have it off screen. So you can shrink this, for example, and have a bunch of text describing the monster or the possible things that could happen with that monster. And that will follow you in that image alone. I don't use this one as much because this particular image does have the whole transparency thing. This is very good for, you know, having a giant wall of information. But I find that it gets a little bit in the way. You can kind of play around with that like that. But hey, everyone uses tools in their own way. You could have this like in a corner down here, so you always have the info on that particular map. But another thing you can do is you can create sticky notes. This is something you can also use in the game field mode. And you can title this note whatever you want. So we'll title it Note 1. And we'll say it was Alabaster's birthday locale. Right, whatever. You close that. And this is useful if you want to remember a particular thing. Like, you're running a complex campaign, you got a lot of stuff going on, you know, there's villages here and there, and you can't possibly remember everything. And instead of having another laptop or having a GM screen actually behind the monitors, which you can still do, you can run everything through here. So let's say this is Alabaster's birth locale. So if they ever go here, like let's right click here, let's publish this. So if you publish it and you're using the map, you can right click or not. That's odd. Maybe it's been such a long time I don't remember how to do it. But you're able to make these guys travel to the location you want. I'm a little confused as to why that's not working. Oh, I think I know why. But let's ignore that for now. In any case, if you move the icon here, they'll see it there. But they're supposed to be able to like waltz in. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It's been a while since I've actually used that. But in any case, if they do end up in this village, you've got this little note. You're like, okay, wait, what was going on here? You click and you're like, oh, it's Alabaster's birthday locale. And you're like, oh, okay, I know what to do now. And you can do the same for whatever, wherever. You can make sticky notes per as many things as you want. And you've got this really powerful beast. And you could create a text with the monster stats right here. But if it's like a quest related thing to his leg, you just like put a sticky note on his leg and like write some stuff there. And then the cool thing is you've got this list here of all the notes you've made and where they're located. So you open up note 1 and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, Alabaster's, and then you click here and it'll take you to that note in that particular area. So that's very useful for managing a lot of information at the same time. Another tool that'll help you with that I don't use, to be really honest with you, is the journal. You can add a category, add a chapter within that category, and then add a paragraph, another paragraph, and you can just go crazy. And you can have a literal journal of information. The problem with doing this is that this remains exclusively in the game, which is very contrary to how DMs work. We don't have a notebook that's just accessible in one place, and unless we're in that one place, we can't take any notes or anything like that. So what you end up doing is you end up having a bunch of notes in somewhere else and copy pasting a bunch of stuff to have it here, and then you never use it because your instinct is going to be to look for your original notes and read up on that stuff. Like in my case, I have it on my tablet, so I'll just open up one note and go to my notes, search stuff, and be done with it, versus opening it up here, which is somewhat organized, to be fair, but it's, I don't know, it just seems odd to have. There's people that find this kind of features cool, but I find them, while cool, somewhat impractical. But if you want to use this, like if you're gonna limit yourself to only taking notes for your campaign and you know, you're always, whenever you're working on your campaign, you're always with this program open, then whatever, fine. My suggestion though would be to have a backup, because video games are fallible. They can corrupt. They can you can accidentally delete your save. You can, you know, you forgot to save, and when you reload, you've accidentally deleted a whole chapter, versus programs like OneNote or Word that automatically save all of your notes. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. The other useful tool you could use if you don't want to roll physically is use the Game Master section. Select the dice you want, add the value you want, and add the number of dice you want, and make a roll. This is good. Wow, that is really low for that many dice. Oh no, it's a D12. That is really useful if you want to make subtle rolls, or if you don't want to rely on physical dice rolls for whatever reason. Like if the room is too dark, or you just prefer the speed of how this works, then that's definitely an option. I've used both systems. They both work in different ways. You should always try to do something that's beneficial to your players. Like if you want to be subtle, this is perfect. If you want to create tension, then the physical dice roll tends to do that better. But for example, rolling a D100 is almost impossible. Very few people actually own a dice that large. And even the one that is that big is kind of weird and wonky. So rolling a D100 here, wow. Oh, there's a plus. There's two of them. Okay. So that's pretty useful to do there. This is more related to the players that are going to be here. If you have only 4 players, you're going to be using this panel to reward them with experience and or gold. But if it's like in my case where I have 8 players, where each one of them will have a henchman, I think I already explained this, then it's useless, because you can only reward 4 of them. And you can use it to reward the 4 of them and then do the henchmen separately. But you don't want to split your players in a weird way like that. Minimap, it's a combat thing. GM skills. Oh, this is super cool. Outside of just limiting yourself to your D&D spells, there's some cool stuff here you can use as inspiration. Some of this stuff is straight up inspired by D&D spells. There's a spell called Shocking Touch, which is one of the basic. Let me put it by tier. Vacuum touch. This one. Shocking Touch is basically Shocking Grasp from D&D. So it's the same spell, and naturally, the game's heavily inspired by Dungeons & Dragons. They've admitted it many times. They're working on Baldur's Gate 3. They play D&D in their offices all the time. The stats for the characters, are basically that, for the exception of memory, which is the weirdest one. And we can talk later about how to balance that, because it should be wisdom. Memory is just kind of, I really don't know why they chose to use this, because this is only useful if you want to have a stupid amount of spells, because you do, as you level, earn memory slots entirely based on your level. So you might spend a couple points here, but that should do it. There's some technical stuff that needs to happen before this. Like, for example, this character wasn't made on its own. You have to make it on a separate instance, which you can do by literally just running the program twice and joining the campaign. Or, like in my case, I have a decent laptop. I'll create the character on the other laptop, or in this case, this computer, so that I can do this, because having a character here, while you don't have to do that, the plus is that you can save. In this case, I'm going to have to load a level, because for some reason it doesn't let me save unless I load a level. Okay, so now that we're on this screen, or this particular junction of the mode, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the ambience. No, sorry, that's to set the atmosphere. We'll select this one. We're gonna hit stop, because the ambience is loud when you're recording stuff and it can get in the way. I'm gonna go back to atmosphere. I'm gonna select something along the lines of day, and I'll put a clear sky so that things are visible. Though this stuff right here isn't important, because as I mentioned, this is related to combat and setting up stages for players. Some of them are walkable, but I would still suggest you have relatively small stages. As you can see, this is pretty small. So you could have a combat encounter with something up here and something down here. Maybe an NPC encounter, and it would limit their walking space to an extent. That you could do that if it's a small group of people. If it's like 4, then it's fine. If it's more than that, then not going to work at all. Obviously, the game is made for 4 players, but I do more than that. But even then, I would focus on role playing and not so much playing around in the game. If, again, your main thing is Dungeons and Dragons versus your main thing being Divinity, then that's a different story. Everyone, each their own. So the important thing about loading a level is now I'm able to do this, right? So I've done a couple of tests already, but now you're able to save, right? So it'll automatically name it for you. You can name it whatever you want, but I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to accept that. What's going to happen is that's going to finish saving. If I go to the main menu, it should allow me to go to Game Master and load this, or even better, just hit continue and it'll load the last save. The cool thing about doing this is that you are able to load the last save without having any players in, even though the player icons are there. So you can play around with anything and edit stuff while the players aren't present, so that when you load back up and they join back in, there'll be new stuff for them to do or to check out. So if I go to map, wait, let me again turn off the ambience. If you put an ambience here and leave it playing, it won't go back to 0. It'll stay playing when you load the level ups. The same applies to music. So my suggestion is, if you're going to be using the stages, set this stuff, leave it playing, so that when the players join the stage, it's all automatically happening. Otherwise, if you leave it blank, it'll play the automatic stuff the stage comes with. Also, I think my graphics are lower than usual, I just noticed. I don't know why. So the cool thing about that is now I can go back to my map section and add things here as I want. Some stuff's different here because I had to take a break, like I mentioned. So I can go ahead and add another monster or play around with the maps. And another thing that I noticed on that little break that I was able to take, ignore the honking, was that this text, when you publish, this is visible to the players wherever it is you put it. You can put it off screen if you wanted, or put it in a particular corner of the map. But be aware that you need to play around with the idea of players reading that. So if you're gonna, okay, my dog just walked in. So if you're gonna be playing with text, I'm not a giant fan of putting text in any particular campaign. This is weird. Oh, it's because the image went back to that because I fucked around with it. So if you were gonna play around with any text during a campaign, which I don't super suggest, because what ends up happening is that you distract the players from whatever's going on with you, or you have to take a pause for them to read that stuff. The other thing you could do is read it out loud, but you sound different when you read things out loud versus just saying them naturally as you remember them or as you improvise as you go. Unless you're a professional voice actor, like, you know, a Matt Mercer or something like that, you're probably not going to get them to fully absorb this as you're reading it. So be very careful how you use this. Same thing goes for here, which is why I haven't showed off this particular section yet, because this is more text. This is basically an image, a descriptive text, and options based on that. But usually what I'll do with this, because this is kind of slideshowy, is that I'll just not put any text. I'll take this image like this, I'll put the image in the middle, scale a little bit. This is really good for transparent images of like monsters and stuff. Change the canvas to something a little bit more threatening, like let's say this is really a mimic. Change the border, again something more threatening, let's say this one. And now we've got something that's not super threatening, but yeah. And now if I publish this, this is what they see. The cool thing about this is you can go side to side, and it's very slideshowy. The problem with this is that if they do something out of order, you can't rely on this. But what you can do is if you hit edit, this is still visible, select the one that's appropriate, publish, and it switches to that one. But again, not a huge fan of putting text in any kind of campaign that the player has to read through. I'm not even a big fan of players taking notes, to be 100% honest with you, because if it's not naturally part of their character to take notes, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for players to be required to take notes. I like my players to be 100% invested in their role playing and focus a little less on the mechanical aspects of the game. The other stuff just kind of, you can play around with it, like if they forget something important, if their character should know it, you can tell them. Or if it's something they clearly should have remembered, you can just be like, well, your character forgot, figure out how you're going to get that information back. Like if it's the name of another person, then you're gonna have to ask. So yeah, I think I'll pretty much leave it at that. Actually, I'm not gonna go back to the main menu because it has loud music. So that's pretty much it. It's a very versatile tool with a lot of possibilities. I use it for pretty much everything except for this vignette mode. I use it in the sense that I do some images there, but mostly I use the map section for maps because you can place these little pins. You can kind of select the areas you want them to remember. You can name them whatever you want. You can associate levels to them by binding levels here. And if you right click it, travel here. That'll allow them to travel there. I don't know if I talked about that. So that's pretty cool for maps. And then it's really cool for images as well. You can play around with this a lot. So I can make the wolf like huge and menacing a little bit there. And we'll put this guy here and we'll do that. Yeah, there you go. And that's pretty much it. I don't know exactly who's going to watch this other than a buddy of mine, but if you do stumble upon this video, I hope that it was informative at the very least. I hope that if you are a little bit of a gamer and a D&D player like me, you can find a way to mix both worlds in ways that are coherent. I do play these games in my office, basically, with a bunch of players sitting around, and it works. When everything goes well, it's awesome. When you get technical issues, it's not so awesome. Just make sure you have decent internet and everything should flow well. I'll do that YouTube thing where I say thanks for watching and subscribe. Bye.